Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today we're going to be doing the 14.8 support tier list. So if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. There weren't a huge amount of support changes this patch. In fact, there was only one direct one, which was fresh. On top of this, we did see some other adjustments, however. Hui, Zac, Skarner, Poppy being added, Galio being slightly adjusted, helps him to support a decent amount. And yeah, let's cover the tier list. So to begin with, the D tier is still going to consist of Twitch, MF, Malphite and Ashe, of which none of these champions are performing particularly well. They have been on the decline in solo queue for a while. In Ashe's case, she was of course very good toward competitive skew and still is decent within competitive skew, but the nerfs towards some of her items and just the generalistic playstyle of this pick is not very recommendable for mid elo. It's definitely more of an elite skewed, pro skewed pick. In Malphite's case, of course, this tends to just be a very popular low elo pick. You don't tend to really see this past like mid into high. It's very reliant on his ultimate, and as like the engage tool can be very punishable in lane. Oftentimes, if you're going the AP variant and you're not ahead, you're really useless throughout the game. And yeah, there's just a lot of caveats with this pick. Something which I'm also just not going to recommend you playing for. MF really struggles with the itemization at the moment. She's definitely in the weakest spot she's been as a support. She's usually on the weaker side, as it's a very simplistic playstyle of dropping the E down, being a bit of an oppressive, slow burn bot. But the playstyle just isn't really coming together at the moment. And in Twitch's case, he's not doing particularly well with the itemization at the moment. The nerfs coming into his W in 14.9 will also cement this spot in the D tier. He does perform a bit better than the other two picks, but yeah, still very much struggling. That is the D tier for the moment. Moving on to the C tier, these champions have a bit more merit. So Veigar definitely performing a bit better than the D tier champs. Still very low elo skewed. You don't really see this pick once again going into mid into high. He's not able to as consistently stack off the wave unless you are using support item primarily on the wave and then just harassing past that. Of course, if you're able to consistently layer down poke, you have a good synergy of the cage, something like a Ziggs for example, then there can be layers to this pick which can definitely give it a bit more functionality. However, for the most part, it's not really that great as like a primary pick option. It definitely comes in as more of like a synergistic pick. And for that, I'm going to leave it in the C tier. Yuumi, also very reliant on the synergies. You're really not going to see this champion pass the likes of Zeri and Lucian in certain circumstances. It's honestly not that bad with Lucian. Sivir, of course, the other one, where you can kind of get through laning phase and be like enable a very strong hyper carry later into the game. The likes of Sivir, Zeri obviously fulfill this. Zeri, of course, being nerfed actually just hurts Yuumi a significant amount, as that tends to be one of her more common pairings. Yuumi, just not a fan of the champion in its current state. Honestly preferred it pre-rework when it was more like you could use it across more of the teammates and it wasn't so conditional on your marksman doing well. I think this one is just substantially worse for the game. Okay, well, last one was substantially worse for the game. This one is just substantially worse as a champion. And I may have to do something with this pick. It's in a horrific spot, has been for a while, and yeah, I'm not too keen on what they've done with it. Hui is also in the C tier. Honestly, I'm surprised he's maintained his play rate since his release. He still has a audience within the support role. Of course, his CC isn't bad. He has like options within, whether you want a fear, whether you want the root, whether you want the pull in. There are options there. Of course, his ult also a very nice slowing tool, can enable good amounts of setup. He tends to just be more of a harass bot within lane. However, you're not usually getting the items which you really need to kind of snowball throughout the game. And Hui already as a champion isn't really designed to 1v9 games. So I will have him in the C tier for that. Of course, he's a bit harder than the likes of Brand, who you can consistently, more consistently snowball on. And Xayah kind of also fits this like unique where you are being an oppressive laner where you can get like more items. Yeah, Zyra, the likes of Hui are better with things like Vel'Koz, Brand, Zyra. I'd recommend these champions over him. Karma, solid C tier pick. Is still not performing great at the moment. Like, I would really recommend waiting until the 49.9 buffs come in and then like reevaluating whether this pick is actually worth playing. Of course, they are buffing the slow, they are buffing the E shield, but for the moment, sticks within the C tier, just isn't bringing enough to the table. Her damage is fine for like a lane bully, but tends to fall off throughout the game, and her E-shielding is what is kind of letting her down in these later team fights. Of course, buffing that up should definitely enable more power with this pick, and maybe we will see this pick maybe jump to the A tier with the changes coming in next patch. Moving on to the B tier, there are a couple of champions here, which, well, the first one being added is Galio. He probably sits towards the higher end of the B tier. He's a great anti-engage option. He can also be utilized as an engage pick. Really likes items like Shorelia, but still struggles a bit more within the support role compared to the mid lane. He does tend to want a couple of items to kind of be able to snowball around the map and use his map mobility. Being limited to support role can definitely hurt in this functionality, whereas mid you can usually push the wave and then roam to sides. It's still a decent pick though, very much deserving of a B tier placement. Teemo, very low elo skewed, great scaling pick, great into like champions that you can kind of disable completely with your Q. Obviously very low elo skewed. Mid elo, it tends to be still performant, but then high elo definitely does fall off a huge amount. Yeah, giga skills throughout the game. You need items on this pick. You kind of want levels to a degree as well, like you want to get those points in R, but he sits as a solid B tier option. Heimerdinger is being removed from the tier list. I haven't added him on there, but his play rate has kind of subsided completely as a support. He wasn't really seeing play at the beginning of the season, and he just hasn't really found success. He's played mostly top at this point, and then some games mid, not really as a support anymore. Seraphine also going to sit within the B tier. They are buffing this pick next patch. Thank God. Seraphine has not been a good support since her release. There might have been patches where she was like overpowered just generalistically, where she might have like fit the role, but like there hasn't been a patch where she's been like primarily good as a support and not overwhelming as other options. I hope the buffs change this, but I don't see them really pushing her out the B tier. She kind of sits towards the bottom of it. She still has good utility, but her damage isn't really there if you want to like play her as an aggro. She has a bit more setup than some of the other support options, but she does want items. She tends to be pretty gold heavy in a way. And yeah, there are better options. Once again, I point towards the likes of Zyra, Brand. Seraphine does have more utility aspects, but yeah, until she's buffed, I wouldn't really recommend playing her over other options. Morgana, I'm not a huge fan of this pick. Very reliant on setup and pairings oftentimes. The Black Shield tends to be pretty bait in a lot of circumstances where like you pick this champion because of the Black Shield value and then you aren't really able to like consistently get it, or ADC's already running cleanse and like the value just isn't really there. Of course, her damage is fine. If you pick up things like Rylai and Leandry, you can be quite obnoxious within team fights, but her general power tends to be limited by the fact that she is very frustrating for a lot of people to play against, which is why she is within the B tier. Swain, just play him as a mid laner and as an APC. He performs significantly better in these roles. He is very reliant on items. You need your Rylai, you need your Malignants, you need Leandry, you need Zonya. Like these items like spikes and stuff like this are very important, like to keep this champion consistently going throughout the game. If you're not hitting these benchmarks, then he really struggles. You tend to be able to blow this champion up before he can really do anything within team fights, whether that's getting the drain down, the slow down. I wouldn't recommend him as a support. He tends to perform better than other roles. However, he still does have value. If you're able to like stay ahead of the curve, then he does function nicely as a good frontline battle mage, and there can be value to that as a pick. Thresh is so close to making it out of the B tier. Like, he is probably the best B tier pick at the moment, but the buffs just weren't enough to really give him that shove into A. In fact, I'm going to bring someone down out of A. I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, he is very close to A tier. Like, Thresh is in a pretty good spot to play at the moment, but as a mid-elo tier list, I just can't really recommend this champion unless you really put a lot of games into him, learn the lantern placements, like learn the combos, consistently land your hooks, stuff like this. Yeah, I can't recommend this champ, but if you do want to play him, he's probably in one of the better spots you can play him at the moment. Tahm Kench, also going to sit within the B tier. He's definitely performing better in solo queue on like the Heartsteel variations, and oftentimes if you're able to just go into like a melee support lane, running things like Grasp over Guardian does tend to be a bit more successful. However, picking the champion purely for his ult value, you can get punished for if your ADC isn't good and like you're putting an over reliance on your ADC being good going into the game, then yeah, that can really hurt. and I'm going to leave him in the B tier for the moment, because oftentimes that is the functionality he is picked for. Alistar, also going to serve in the B tier, just not performing to the same level as a lot of the A tier picks. He is a bit more reliant on combos and like snowballing lanes, stuff like this. And if you fall behind on Alistar, you will just run it down. Like, you don't really have much of a choice. Your entire kit relies on you going in, and if you don't have the ability, like if your teammates don't have the ability to follow up, or they don't have the damage, like you're far behind, then yeah, you'll just struggle throughout the game. Sits in the B tier for the moment. If he was a bit more durable, could definitely see him rising up through the tiers. Pantheon is probably going to fall next patch, but for the moment, he's kind of hovering in B tier. Probably sits towards the bottom of the B tier, beneath a couple of these champions. We are beginning to see Pantheon support fade away again. He's not in a bad spot at the moment. Like, he definitely is better this season compared to last season. A lot of the items are really strong on him. Eclipse, Sundered Sky, Steric, all these are really nice. Same kind of thing goes for Camille, who I'm also going to put within the beta. We did primarily nerf support Camille. Camille top in a really good spot at the moment. Solid S tier pick. But yeah, Camille support definitely falling down towards the B tier at the moment. Nothing the likes of Bloodsong also very much hurt Camille. So yeah, she sits here. Shen, also towards the high end of the beta. If there are any beta champions I'd really recommend playing at the moment, it's probably Fresh, Shen, Galio. They are a bit more consistent. They have a bit more durability. Of course, Fresh had his durability buff this patch, which is why he is in a better spot. He's still pretty reliant on landing Qs, but like if you're able to like land Flay, you put points in E, you can still do a decent amount of damage. You can even max Lantern in certain situations. Well, go like E max into W max, so sometimes even like 3 points E max W. There are options there. You kind of have to pick what you need during the game. But yeah, consistency and just overall team fighting capability, these champions can have a bit more presence, which is why they definitely fall towards the higher end of the beta. And yeah, Nautilus is actually what I'm going to bring down. This is the pick which I believe to no longer be like worthy of an A tier spot. He, as his pick rate has increased and like people are picking him into worse situations, he's really beginning to falter as just a champion. He does struggle into a lot of the picks within the meta now. If you're not able to consistently get leads, then it can really hurt playing this champion. He was really strong when the likes of Senna was really popular. Like, he was one of the biggest winners of Senna being within the meta. Now that Senna has also fallen down, he's also fallen down a bit. Like, he was poaching a bit of win rate out of that. And yeah, he now sits within the B tier. He's still a high B tier option, just no longer worthy of an A tier spot. Skarner probably sits at the high end of the A tier. This is another new addition to the tier list. He's beginning to see playing the support role, which is good. He's been decent in support. Even last patch, before he received a bunch of buffs, he wasn't performing too badly here. But yeah, the buffs came in. He was probably an S tier pick. He got hotfix nerfed, brings him down to the A tier. He's going to get nerfed down again. I imagine it might bring him down to the B tier. I'm kind of compensating for the fact that like his play rate is, well, his run rate does increase by the day, so it probably would result in him being S tier by the end of a patch. But as I'm making this now, probably sits within the high A tier, low S tier kind of region. And yeah, I'll leave him in the A tier. He's a solid pick. If you put the games in, then you should be able to find some success before the end of this patch. However, beware, he is being nerfed next patch pretty heavily, as he is overperforming. So yeah, sits in the A tier for the moment. Senna also going to be in the A tier. She's definitely fallen down at this point. No longer finding the same amount of success she was at the beginning of the season. She has been nerfed twice. She indirectly got nerfed by Yomu's being hit. And then, yeah, of course, you're looking at the builds like the Opportunity, the Edge of Night. Bloodsong also being nerfed did definitely hurt her. And then, yeah, going like RFC. And then you can go into crit variations. Or you can pick up things like a Vigilant Wardstone if you want a bit more durability. There are options there. But, yeah, no longer still finding the same level of success. Definitely towards the bottom of the A tier now. Nico also tends to be a bit more reliant on, like, the player's mechanics on this champion. Still a decent lane bully. If you can land your snares consistently and you can harass with Q, Scorch, Airy, stuff like this. And yeah, there's lots of power to this pick, but not performing to the same level as a lot of the higher picks within A tier and going into S tier. Lux also going to move in the A tier. The buffs definitely did help her, put her in a better spot. Definitely a solid A tier option now. Passive getting buffed and the Q gaining a 5% AP ratio. However, of course, she is still very greedy for items. If you're not finding an advantage on this pick, she can end up being useless throughout the game. And yeah, the main kind of thing here is you need to snowball. If you fall behind, you do get punished for it quite heavily, which, unlike the likes of Brand, can oftentimes still operate on just items like Rylai. Moving on, Bard is also going to sit within the A tier. They kind of shifted his power around towards the beginning of this season. He was overperforming, like, in terms of his damage output. He is now a bit more durable, and it lost him a bit of power. Of course, Bloodsong being nerfed did hurt him. However, you should have been going Slay before. It's even more important to be going Slay now. The item performs really well on him. And then just going into like tanky variations, you can opt into things like Dark Seal. Of course, if you're snowballing, RC can function if you're like really far ahead. But yeah, kind of sits middle of the A tier now. Xerath also going to sit middle of the A tier. Once again, akin to Lux, tends to be a bit greedy on the gold side of things. Definitely performs better in low elo. Kind of dwindles within mid, and like unless you're very proficient at hitting your skill shots and you're very understanding of like lane, like the lane, but it doesn't really. You have to be understanding of these kind of things to like have them function within high elo. Otherwise, you will get punished against champions like Nautilus. Like if you make mistakes within lane, they will punish you. So it sits within the A tier for the moment. Moving on, Zilean also going to sit the A tier. Okay, so the weird thing with Zilean, like, Zilean's always been kind of decent. Like, this pick, of course, has value in the fact that it gives movement speed, gives XP, the revive is really valuable, but, like, movement speed creep this season has definitely hurt him a bit. Like, he's no longer this kind of, like, staple. He's no longer as needed as being a movement speed bot because so many people have access to movement speed. Like people just taking goes, people are having like items which just give the movement speed. The likes of Storm Surge, of course, is an example. It just gives 8% movement speed, which is nice for the users of the item and makes them less reliant on movement speed from other sources. In Zilean's case, just overall kind of like power creep, if anything. It's definitely hurt this pick. Kind of puts him more towards the A tier. Even if the items and like surrounding things haven't done a huge amount, it's mostly just the movement speed creep, which has definitely kind of come in. Pyke, gonna sit within the A tier. He's still performing fine on the lethality builds. You're still going like your Umbral, your Youmu's, your Opportunity. Hubris can work if you're like really heavily snowballing. Grudge if you need a bit more pen. And then the likes of GA, of course, really nice if you do need that revive. You have to be like getting advantages on this pick. However, if you do, he is very oppressive. You can close out games and just snowball really fast throughout and like really speed up the tempo of games. Renata, still a solid pick. Great with a lot of marksmen. The likes of Varus, Ashe, and just honestly a lot of hyper carries. She can function really well with them. The revive, the attack speed, the movement speed. There's just lots of values to this pick. The ult is a great choking tool. Like if you can force people to like back out of fights or like down choke holds, then she is incredibly oppressive and can change fights all by herself. However, she just doesn't have the same like level of solo carrying potential as a lot of the S tier, which is why she's going to sit middle of the A tier. Lulu, solid enchanter, got buffed more recently and has definitely been thriving off these changes. I honestly expect her to be pretty performant within competitive if we do see this like shift towards like hyper carries for likes of Zeri and Jinx. If we do start seeing more lane bullies, then she will probably get punished by the likes of that. We might see some lane swaps come in, but for solo queue, still a solid A tier pick. The buffs definitely did help her. Allows her to enable marksman more frequently to carry throughout the game. The marksman buffs did also really help Lulu. She indirectly benefits from this as someone who enables people to carry. Maokai, his simplicity kind of keeps him afloat at this point. He's been nerfed so many times in the support role. However, he's still a decent pick. His setup, his E providing so much like valuable intel can oftentimes be the difference between dying a bunch within lane and then dying not at all to ganks. Which can be really impactful depending on what kind of lane you're playing. He scales pretty well as a support option, works really nicely with Slay, and then you tend to go into tank items. However, he's just not as successful as before. His simplicity is also probably where he has his biggest downfalls as well. You can't really make because there isn't really that much of a skill ceiling to this pick, you're not really going to be able to shift games in your favor if you are already losing games, unless you are able to land like huge multi-man ults, and then maybe that does something. But yeah, it tends to be the simplicity of the pick which gives it a lot of value. and still a solid tank option. Zac stays within the A tier. The health regen definitely did hurt him. Of course, he is now susceptible to more poke. However, it wasn't enough to really push him out of the A tier. He's still a great engaged tank option. Can also work really nicely for disengage. His damage is also solid. And yeah, he's just a bit more punishable. Shaco, also going to be in the A tier. His traps are incredibly valuable. He does a huge amount of damage. He can, and to a degree, solo carry games by himself as a support option. You do need, for the most part, support like other things to support you, but like your setup alone for like Drake fights can like sway the entire like tempo of the game, and oftentimes that can be the difference maker. If you learn your placements, you learn the movement of the clone. Yeah, there's lots of value to this pick, and he scales pretty well. Great setup, great control champion. Well, gonna be me A tier as well. The nerfs towards jungle definitely kind of kept her power neutral when she gained a bit of MR. Of course, there is no flex value to this pick anymore. She's guaranteed to be going into the support role. If you are playing to the likes of Poppy, then you will really struggle, as you can't really engage in that matchup. However, she is still very strong at what she does. Her team fighting is great. Her CC is really punishing if you are caught within it. Her shield shatter is also something to give her a decent amount of more value if you're able to pick her in games where there is like multiple steric spies or just a generalistically large amount of shielding. Then yeah, there's lots of value on this champion. Her resist still is also really nice. And yeah, great engaged champion, solid A tier option. And then Rakan and Soraka are going to be what wrap up the A tier. But like for the most part, a lot of the top end of the A tier are pretty competing with the S tier. In Rakan's case, he's still a great engage option, pairs really nicely with a lot of marksmen, works really good with Xayah, even though Xayah isn't performing particularly well at the moment. His simplicity, his crowd control, his itemization is all pretty good at the moment. You can go Celestial opposition, but once again, Slay tends to outperform this. And then yeah, you tend to go things like Knight's Vow. Zeke's tends to work on this champion pretty well. And yeah, performing pretty decently at the moment. Soraka also performing pretty well at the moment. Her healing is really valuable. Her buffs not too long ago allowed her to definitely, I wouldn't say skyrocket, but like hold her ground as like this solid enchanter option. Her healing is probably one of the best, if not the best, within the support role. Sona does compete within this space though. Of course, Sona tends to be a bit more AoE. Soraka, very single target with her W. Of course, if you build things like Moonstone and her ult are a bit more like team-wide value. But yeah, Soraka, Sona can more consistency. Soraka, single target. Lots of value on this pick. The silence is also a very strong tool. Not as oppressive within lane unless you do like put points in queue where you can like be a bit more oppressive if you're able to like consistently force people into tower. However, you oftentimes will get a bit more punished within lane. Anti-heal buys can be frustrating, but yeah, still huge amounts of value to this pick. Great with hyper carry pairings. Tend to want to play hook champs once again with like engage aggro picks, but yeah, Soraka great with like carry options. Solid A tier option. Poppy is going to be the champion added to the S tier. She is performing really well at the moment. She is a great anti-engage champion. Her damage is very high. Her durability is also really high. You can go tanky variations where you are going like the Knight's Vow. You can pick up things like Zeke's. You can go things like Dead Man's. That is really nice for like roaming and just upfront durability. There are lots of items you can go on this pick, and like she can function around them. Cinder Sky, of course, is another one. Blood Song, if you want the Sheen. Slay, great if you want a healing and a bit more supportive capability. Yeah, Poppy, great S tier pick. Probably the closest champion to the S plus tier, and kind of beginning to see play. Vel'Koz also going to sit with the S tier. He is performing quite well at the moment. This is like Shirelli's Vel'Koz. You can of course go standard builds. They don't perform as well. He tends to really value Shirelli as an item, and that is what gives him so much value at the moment. And yeah, fulfilling a great spot in the S tier. Nami also performing really well. Her change from E to W max benefited just the average player base, helped her synergies with the likes of Lucian, both of them gain win rate off that, and just generalistically helped Nami as a champion. Her healing's more, of course she did lose a bit of damage, but that she doesn't mind too much. Like the bounce fall off isn't as aggressive, so you can gain back some of that damage through that damage. Gain back some of the damage which you lost through that damage fall off. Being like nerfed, well, buffed technically, so it isn't as aggressive in terms of how much you lose. But yeah, still great with like pairings like Brand, Lucian, but still functions quite well with other champions. Taric also going to move in the S tier. Taric still performing decently as an anti-engage and just a good solid anti-AD option. Like if you want a support which is very resistant to a lot of AD picks, then Taric does have armor scalings. The likes of Frozen Heart, Fimbulwinter tend to be pretty mandatory on this champion. He's also really good with the likes of Knight's Vow, and his overall supportive capabilities to simplicity just give him a lot of value. Brand, great character. Well, Brand and Zyra I'm going to put next to each other. Both these champions are incredibly powerful. Like solo carry supports kind of way. They have so much damage within their kits, it's almost excessive at some points, but that gives them so much value within team fights. They can, to a degree, just change the outcome, and oftentimes like do the most damage within these fights, and that is off like a limited budget. Like you're not earning as much gold as your carry unless you are consistently taking kills, which of course you then can output more damage than like your entire team. Liandry, Rylai, really good on these champions. The burn, the slows, they can consistently rotate them, and it just gives them so much value. And then moving on to the last 6 champions. So Milio, great for his powerings. The W is an incredibly valuable tool. He really wants Ardent Sensor and picks which really benefit from this item. Braum also going to win the S tier. Braum has been good for a while. People are beginning to really pick up on this. His synergies are great. His passive is an incredibly strong tool. His E also really nice at blocking like big projectiles. Jinx being popular helps Braum as his E can block that R. His R also a great tool. There's just lots of strengths of this pick at the moment. Lots of like melee fighters or like fast attacking mid laners can also really benefit this champion. Blitzcrank, still a solid S tier pick. Probably the best hook champ and usually kind of fits that spot for the most part. His consistency, his ability to just alter the game within one hook can just be like, it is game changing. That is the whole point of this pick. You can operate on items like a Bloodsong, Slay, and then you can just go things like Zeke's or just Locket, Knight, stuff like this. Can all function quite nicely on him. Leona, great S tier pick. You don't tend to see as many Merc Treads pickups within solo queue, and that is where she really thrives. If the enemy doesn't have a lot of tenacity, then she can really heavily lock down champions. If the enemy ADC doesn't have cleanse, then they are really punishable. Or if they don't have a lot of mobility, then you can also punish them through that. But yeah, Leona, great champion in that space. And then the S plus tier, still the same 2 champions. We have Sona and Janna. Janna is a great pick at disengaging. Her ult and her Q are great within that kind of space. Her damage amp on E is also incredibly valuable with shielding, also really nice there. The W is an incredibly impressive tool. Like, it's probably one of the strongest abilities in the game at the moment. Just the ability to walk up in lane and just point and click someone for a huge burst of damage, and then also slow them, and so your ADC can follow up, your Q can also follow up with this. Yeah, it's just lots of tools on this pick, and it puts her in an incredibly valuable spot. And then Sona, her buffs not too long ago have massively helped. She is an incredibly strong solo queue pick at the moment. You do kind of want to put her with pairings which she can like really like get a lot of value through her buff ups with, and you don't want to be playing so much a lane which can just get walked over, as that can put her in a really hard spot, like through like not being able to scale throughout the game. However, you are more consistently going to be able to scale in low to mid elo. Will get punished a bit harder in high, but hopefully like people will understand that is like what happens, and they'll play in some cases more aggressive ADCs, or in cases understand that like there isn't angles for aggression and play a bit more safer on the turret. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Sona and Janna, I'd really recommend. If you want better carry picks, then Brand, Zyra are great within that space. Engage options, you have the likes of Poppy. She's incredibly oppressive at the moment. Probably the sleeper OP champion of the pick. Still a great solid amount of enchanters. Milio, Soraka, Nami all fit this space quite well. And then yeah, Taric, Blitz, Braum, Leona, also great picks at the moment. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next one. Goodbye.